I imagine there's a good amount of you that don't know, so I wanted to inform you guys about a few things. There isn't going to be a patch preview with 1.7 because it's going to be a relatively small update. According to Evil Mojo Molly, it's going to have plenty of bug fixes and very little balance. I'm not positive if any skins are going to come out with it, but I know it's coming within the next week. Now, the reason for the lack of balance is because 1.7 is the update the pro players are going to play at HRX, so it'd be unfair to rebalance the game because they wouldn't have time to practice, and that's fine. It's important the games at HRX are as good as possible for the viewers. However, 1.8 comes out after HRX, and this is when they're supposed to be getting out some big balance according to Evil Mojo Killgoon on Reddit. The burst meta is one of the most hated metas in the game to date, and rightfully so. Nobody likes having nearly all of their health disappear in an instant. It doesn't feel fair and it doesn't feel skillful. The overall death of the burst meta is something we've all been eagerly awaiting, and it finally seems to be coming. It's still a ways off, but at least it's in sight. In case you aren't positive on what the burst meta is, it isn't just all burst damage. Like Bomb King does 900 damage in a burst, but the burst meta isn't that. And that's because Bomb King has always had a balanced time to kill, at least around his skill requirement. The burst meta is due to characters with overly high burst. Cassie and Willow both do almost 1300 burst with their burst combos. Cassie is firing an arrow and impulse at the same time, Willow is firing a blast and nightshade at the same time. Drogos' Fire Spit Salvo combo kills most squishies. That's a big burst of damage, and like Cassie and Willow's combo, it's easy to do. This is a simple fix though, you just make it so Salvo can't detonate Fire Spit. Dredge has like 4 burst combos, and Dredge is like Vivian in the sense that both their releases are hated because they're both overpowered spam characters. Again, Vivian isn't anymore, just when Vivian came out everyone hated her. Dredge is worse because even when Vivian was released, it was a lot easier to counter her. Dredge needs plenty of work, in all honesty. Victor's Shrapnel talent is very stacked and gets off very easy burst. A Shrapnel Victor should normally always get top damage because of how easy his damage is to confirm. Kinessa's Eagle Eye talent also counts because you one-hit most squishies with a crit, and some may argue that it's balanced because it takes skill, and it does take a bit of skill, but it's still a one-hit, and one-hits were supposed to be left to ultimates exclusively. It was a rule they later broke with Kinessa. Sniper's one-hitting in this game doesn't fit. It works in Overwatch because the time to kill is so low, but in this game it's higher, and if the burst meta is going, then this needs to go too. Now, I'm gonna be frank here. The traditional way they do balance isn't going to work here. It rarely ever works in the first place, and what I mean is when something is strong, they nerf it to the point where it's not even useful anymore. A good example is Maeve. Maeve has been good 3 times, and all 3 times Maeve has been nerfed basically into non-existence. If they did that to all of the burst meta characters, then we'd have a lot less variety in the game because a lot of the characters wouldn't be worth picking. Let's look at Willow. Willow is only viable because of Nightshade. You could say that Dead Zone also makes her viable, but Dead Zone alone hasn't been able to keep her in the meta in the past. The burst that Nightshade offers on top of the anti-heal Dead Zone offers is what has made Willow viable. If they take that burst away and give Willow nothing, you send her back out of viability. So when they nerf these burst meta characters, they need to give them something in return. Something else that's strong, but not just something blatantly powerful like a burst combo. Like if they take Nightshade away from Willow, they need to look at her and say, well, only Dead Zone is good about this character and everything else is rather weak. Instead of putting all of Willow's power into one burst combo like before, let's give the rest of her kit little boosts to make her an all-around better character. Now, I'm not going to go into exactly what they could do to each character to make them all around better because this video would be massive. I'm just trying to explain the more effective way to go about balancing, because with all due respect, their way has not been working. Flat out nerfing things over and over almost never goes well. And this leads me to the next thing about balance, and that's that they can't stop at the burst meta, because the game has other balance problems that need to be attended to. A big one right now is the state of flanks, and this topic is always super controversial because how good flanks are varies depending on a few things. One is if you're on PC or console, and the other is how good of a player you are. The lower the skill of the enemy players, the more effective the person playing the flanks are, and that's because flanks are normally smaller and faster, so they're more difficult to hit, and because a lot of lower tier players don't have the awareness or the knowledge on how to deal with them. That's how it is, and that's how it's always been. The higher up you go, the less effective flanks are as a whole. Like in the PPL, the absolute highest level of play, the only flanks you see are Andro, who's picked and banned constantly. Then you see a bit of Eevee, mainly in EU because EU has better ping than NA, and Eevee is a pretty ping intensive character, and then you rarely see the rest of them. Like Xin has popped up a few times and lost most of those times. I think Bugsy played Maeve the other day, but the skill difference between Fnatic and who they were fighting is pretty big, so there's leeway for picking her there. The flanks for the most part just aren't in a good spot, and they often aren't in a good spot because of how much they get nerfed. There have been several metas now that you just don't see them very much in. Androxus is an outlier. If anything, he needs a few nerfs, like a small cooldown on his punch, and if the burst meta is going, then Henzel Roll could probably get a nerf too, cause the crit damage on that is pretty crazy. Some flanks don't need much at all, like Buck, Talus, and Xin. They just need the burst meta to go away for the most part, and they'll be fine. Xin needs his projectile clipping bug fixed on top of that, and he'll be good to go. Eevee is fine for the most part. If they could somehow make her feel better across more levels of ping, that'd be great. But as for the rest, Koga, Maeve, Lex, Moji, Skye, they all need some real love. Skye needs a kit rework. We were all very disappointed to figure out the rework for her was only visual. They don't want to buff Skye because Skye is very unfun for players at the lowest level of play. However, at any other level of play, Skye is basically useless. The only good thing about her is her poison bolts would debilitate. At her core, Skye is in a very unhealthy place in all aspects of the game, and when you have a character in that position, that means you have to rework her. If her problem is at her core, there's nothing else you can do but rework her. It's not fair that this character has been useless for years, longer than any other character in the game. It's even more unfair when you consider that this is one of the original 8 characters in the game. The burst meta and the flanks are the big balance problems right now, but there are a few other things that can use some adjusting too. Strix's and Tyra's reveals with unauthorized use in Hunting Party are pretty absurd. They both basically reveal people forever and nobody likes playing against it. They both need to be brought down. In Strix's case, you can nerf the talent and he'll be fine. With Tyra though, you nerf it and you have to give her something else because Hunting Party getting that big buff is what made her viable in higher levels of play in the first place. Torvald always gets all of his power put into his bubble, and nobody ever likes it when all of his power is in his bubble. Torvald is another character whose problem is at his core. In public games, Torvald is pretty strong. In coordinated games like scrims, tournaments, PPL, he isn't all that great because of how many things there are to counter his only use of putting bubbles on people. A character built around barriers in a game where you can buy a counter to barriers or having it on specific characters from the start of the game is never going to be in a good spot. So like Skye, he would need some kind of rework. Leon's Def and Tax's talent also needs to be brought down. Before this talent, Leon was fine. I know a lot of people don't like aimbot, I get it, but balance-wise the character was always fine with it, never really overpowered. Def and Tax's is what's overpowered. 90% cauterize at the start of the game with all of her cot spread potential is too much. If anything, it should be 75% like all the other early game cots. You could say that because it's a talent, it should be higher, but the loadout cards give caught on abilities, not the primary fire, and the talent does, so that little detail is what justifies it being a talent. So hopefully when 1.8 comes around, we will see a lot of that addressed going into Season 2. There is another thing though. With this season, all the big balance was at the start or in the middle. If Evil Mojo messes up the balance and we make that clear to them, they can't wait until mid-season to fix it. That's too long. It needs to be fixed in a reasonable amount of time. We don't want to go through another long, unbalanced meta. Mid-season is like a quarter of a year away after all. Anyway, I just wanted to relay that information out to you guys and talk about how the game's balance could be improved. Please feel free to leave your balance ideas in the comments below. And again, I'm not a console player, I can't speak for console, so console players feel free to let me know how you would like things done on console. And that's pretty much it guys, I want to thank you all for watching, I very much appreciate it, and I'm gonna see you guys later. Bye!